Hi there. I'm Marilyn Zakhour, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs. Ramadan Mubarak to all, and welcome to the opening of our fourth season of Center Stage. A couple of years ago, I sat down with a leader I deeply admire, accomplished, brilliant, the kind of person who fills the room without saying a word, and a leader who had really taken the family business in his second generation and developed it to something outstanding. And when I invited him onto our podcast, this very podcast, he looked at me and said, "You know, I've never agreed to speak publicly, but if I ever do, you'll be the first to know." That sentence stayed with me because I've heard it or some version of it from so many of the extraordinary leaders in this region, not because they don't have something to say, but because our culture taught them in the same way that it has taught me that visibility is vanity, that the work should speak for itself, that stepping into the light is somehow stepping out of line. And I say as it taught me because I was exactly that person. When I was CEO of Dubai Opera and CMO of Amar, journalists would often reach out to feature me. And every single time, my answer was an immediate no thanks. My work will speak for itself. And then I started Cosmic Centaurs from scratch during a pandemic with no consulting network to fall back on. And I got my first client and I hired Tala, who was the first person to join me. And she joined and she asked, "What do you want me to do here?" And I said, "I don't know what we sell yet, but I want everybody to know when they should come to us." Because in building this company and selling my first project and looking to the future, I realized something that made me extremely uncomfortable at that time. That if I had stayed silent, that wouldn't be humility, that would be selfishness. Because every time I refused to show up, I was punishing the company I was trying to build and the people I wanted to build it with. And that shift from my work will speak for itself to it is my responsibility to speak for my work, for my people, for my region. That shift is exactly what this season is about. For those joining us for the first time, Cosmic Centaurs is an organizational and leadership development consultancy, and we work with holistic leaders to help them build organizations that thrive and deliver. And Center Stage, this very episode that you're watching or listening to right now, this is our live video series, a space where we feature thought leaders who share insights, opinions, and perspectives about the future of work and how we lead. And each season has been very different on this podcast. Each season we choose a different lens. When we started it in 2020, we were talking about the future of work and learning. And our most recent season, we looked outward. We studied the triumphs and failures of global organizations and the leaders behind them, from Nokia to Fujifilm to IKEA to Nissan. And we asked in that season what the world could teach us. But today, we turn the lens inward. This season, we tell our own stories. And I want to tell you why we made that choice. Since our inception, and honestly, my whole career, we've had the honor of working with really remarkable and inspirational leaders from our region. And we've seen firsthand how impactful they are and how important it is to tell their story. And in addition to Center Stage, every year we organize a conference. If you've been following me or the company for any period of time, you probably know that because during the few weeks where we run that conference, you can't get us out of your LinkedIn feed. And this year, as we began planning for the Cosmic Conference back in June for our theme, I was adamant that I already knew what the theme would be. I wanted us to talk about leading from the Arab world. We were quite sure there'd be much to learn. It just was us who hadn't found it yet. And so our entire team of 12 spent an entire day, a grow day, as we like to call them, which is a day where we pick a topic that we're interested in learning about, and we just spend the entire day looking for research. And that particular day, in I think it was early July, we spent the day looking for academic research on leading in the Arab world, on Arab leadership. And it was horrible. We couldn't find much. Most leadership-related research on top of it wasn't even produced here. It was produced in Western contexts, and we wanted to be represented. And when we found a bit of meta-research on this topic, we found that in the last 17 years, in most major management publications, there had only been 176 peer-reviewed articles on leadership in the Arab world in 17 years. That's less than 11 per year, and that's less than 2 per journal in 17 years. And the real surprise is that 62% of them were written by people who had no affiliation to scholars in the region, and 43% of them didn't even have an Arab co-author. We were being seen and our stories were being told by people who don't even sit here or aren't even from here. And this season is our response, and it's not a small thing. We're a region that builds cities in days, that has launched space missions, that's redesigning our economies in the matter of decades, not centuries, that's shaping global markets. Our economic ambition is extraordinary and it's visible. I went to London in November and I couldn't sit at a table or walk in the street without someone talking about moving to Dubai or Riyadh sitting next to me, entirely by mistake. And despite being so visible, our intellectual visibility, our presence in the global conversation about leadership just hasn't caught up. And if we don't shape the narrative of leadership from this region, someone else will. Someone else has. Someone with incomplete context, someone who doesn't share our values. I listened to a short clip from Hamad Labbar this week, where he was talking about the Chinese partner that helped him to build a 12-story building in 15 days in Abu Dhabi. And he was sharing how, he walked into this person's house and the shoes were outside. And he's like, oh, we do this too. And then he went to the dinner table and this person's mom was sitting there. And he's like, we do this too. And he said, my respect to the West, but we're not the same. And I've learned in the West, by the way. I've studied in INSEAD. I've worked in Europe, in North America. But the people who tell my story, I want them to have context. I want them to share my values. I want them to have sat in a majlis. I want them to have navigated the complexity of leading here and felt the weight and the responsibility and the energy of what it means to build something in this part of the world. To me, this is about narrative sovereignty, as I called it the other day on a webinar with Tala. It's about moving from being the subject of the conversation to being the author of the conversation. And it's about ensuring that the values that shape leadership here, values of hospitality, of community concern, of long-term vision, of ambition, courage, and integrity, that those values are not diluted or misinterpreted or quietly erased from the global record. These aren't soft values. They're a different and deeply needed model of leadership, and one that I believe the world right now needs deeply and has much to learn from. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. Last November at the Miss Global Forum, we took a first step. When we couldn't find enough data and enough academic research to soothe our curiosity last year, we said, all right, this is our new manifesto. We are going to start contributing to this conversation, no matter how small those steps are. We're just going to keep taking them and hopefully grabbing a few people to join us along the way. And so last year, we were invited by MISC to animate a session at the MISC Global Forum. It was a co-creation session, and we hosted about 80 young Saudi leaders. We called that session Leadership Made in Saudi. And we asked them two very simple questions. We asked, what's a leadership trait that leaders from here can teach the rest of the world? And what global challenges are we uniquely positioned to solve? And the answers were beautiful. They weren't about efficiency or productivity. They weren't about speed or status, and mostly they weren't about individual achievements. The answers that we got were around hospitality, empathy, selflessness, collective responsibility. And we documented those insights in a white paper, our first small but hopefully meaningful step toward building an archive of Indigenous leadership wisdom. And I'm sure the team will add the link for you to download it if you're interested. And so our mission has become to document, to elevate, and to codify leadership and organizational practices emerging from the Arab world, turning this lived experience that we have, the things that we see the leaders that we collaborate with do and how we see them lead, that we think is worth becoming enduring knowledge. We're going to do this through conversations here in Center Stage, through research, through publications, through playbooks. I've just been announced this week as a TEDx speaker on April 15, where I'll be talking about what the world can learn from leadership here. And this season of Center Stage is dedicated to that. We're going to be hosting leaders and leadership development experts from the region who lead here to share insights and lived experiences on what it truly means to lead, build, and transform from this region. We'll have leader stories, so C-suite leaders, executives, founders who share their own personal leadership journeys, their pivotal decisions, the challenges, the lessons, what shaped how they lead today and what they hope the world can learn from that experience. And the experts, leadership and organizational development experts, who will unpack their own perspective, their frameworks, their tools, and the patterns that they've observed that are unique to our context. And as always, we'll be talking at different levels. We'll explore the idea of leading yourself, our identity, our leadership style, our inner systems of values, beliefs, and mindsets, and the personal discipline that shape how we show up, and the spiritual influences sometimes of that personal discipline. We're going to talk about leading others, how we lead teams, how we build trust, set direction, make decisions, handle conflict, grow others. We're going to talk about leading organizations. And so the practices and the systems that these leaders have built or influenced across, as you now know, strategy, structure, culture, processes, governance, and the institutional choices that shape their long-term impact. Just like today's going to be short. I'm going to be wrapping up soon, but it was just meant to introduce you to the season. But just like today, we'll be going live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Dubai time, 3 p.m. Saudi, and 2 p.m. Beirut time, starting next week. And I want to close with this. The season isn't just another series of Center Stage. It is the beginning of a broader documentation effort, an archive in the making, a collective act of authorship by leaders who've earned the right to tell their own stories and who are finally choosing to do so. If that resonates with you, I invite you to be a part of it. Subscribe to our podcast, follow us on YouTube, nominate a speaker, nominate yourself, and join us on LinkedIn Live every Wednesday. And next Wednesday, we begin with Shireen Shalak, who's the CFO of Microsoft UAE, with an episode that is titled Baraka, Leadership That Multiplies, as she shares her leadership journey through a national innovation agenda. I can't wait for you to hear from her and from every leader who follows. Thank you for being here.